Hello and welcome to Fine Print, the double scrutiny of the story and its coverage with me, Amir Arafat. First, as always, we start with a quick check of the big print. First, Clinton's visit to Africa comes after President Obama's visit just a few weeks back in Ghana, and that very important speech. But what exactly is the difference between the Obama years and the Bush years as far as the Africa policy is concerned?
Well, the Bush approach is very similar to that of the Obamas as far as I'm concerned. The only differences that we've seen thus far is that Bush actually pushed quite heavily on the issues of HIV on the African continent. Obama's been very much in terms of style and swagger and charisma that he's brought to the table, but very much so the emphasis has been strategically trying to place itself with Africa in terms of relationships, and more so into how they can actually access Africa's minerals, and concern excessively so the fact that the Chinese have been taking a massive lead on their relationship with Africa, and the Americans are desperate to ensure that they don't come second to that. So in terms of issues, the difference between Obama and that of his predecessor, very little difference, I would say.
An entire continent, 11 days and 7 countries. What is behind Secretary Clinton's itinerary? Why is Clinton going to Africa? What are the issues? Why is Kenya important for the United States? Why is Clinton meeting Somalia's president in Kenya? What is the state of U.S. relations with South Africa? Why is Angola included in the 7-nation itinerary? What will the message be in Democratic Republic of Congo? What will Clinton do in Nigeria? Why Liberia? Why is she stopping over in Cape Verde?
The countries that have been listed, South Africa being a powerhouse on the African continent, and they should likely deserve a visit of that nature. But I think Ms. Clinton would be looking to put pressure on Zuma to ensure that he puts the Zimbabwean leader into line, because they've been quite concerned about Mr. Mugabe for some time, and she would like to put some pressure on him through the South Africans. On the issue of Liberia, a small nation where it's got the first female leader, going there is very much in terms of recognition of what she's achieved, but more so acknowledging the problems that Liberia faces, especially coming out of 2 decades of war. And I personally think that the Liberian leader has been very, very keen to support the AFRICOM for the United States to have a military base. And I think more than likely Liberia is one of many countries that are willing to put their hand up to accept that. In places like Nigeria, the emphasis clearly is that of consolidating relationships, but more so concern about recent religious conflicts that we've seen on that soil between Christians and Muslims, and of course trying to address the Delta region issues to do with oil and issues like that. So I think Clinton will be pushing on that. Elsewhere in Africa, a lot of other African countries will be saying they've got similar issues. They've got issues with trade, issues with development, and they would ideally like to see the Americans visit them. But it would appear that they've chosen places like Kenya, which for their strategic position, so close to Somalia, so close to Sudan, conflict regions in themselves for a whole raft of reasons, and of course they would like the Kenyans to bring pressure on Somalia, because the government that's there is really, really weak. More than likely insurgent fighters, the Al-Shabaab, are very, very strong at the moment, and I think the United States, who have branded the Al-Shabaab group as a terrorist organization, are quite concerned because of their influence in that country. So you've got a whole raft of issues being discussed, and a whole reasons why these specific countries have been chosen. And of course, if you think about it, Kenya was the land by which Obama's father came from. Many Kenyans see Obama as a Kenyan, and so rightfully so, that relationship is being strengthened. On places like Angola and Congo, you've got issues surrounding the oil issue, minerals with the Congo, and of course, as you know, Angola, they've got got serious quantities of oil and natural gas, and there's a reason for that. But the problem is for all that wealth, a lot of Africans living in that country are desperately poor. So we're not seeing the translation of mineral wealth into action that benefit the poor on the ground. So I think these are some of the things that Clinton would have to look at and tackle, and I'm hoping that she'll be in a position to do so. Of course, smaller nations, very much like the little island Cape Verde that's been selected, the reason for that is because, and again, they've got no oil. They've got very few minerals, if at all. So it's very much for their democratical credentials.
After all is said and done, 11 days gone, what exactly is Secretary Clinton taking home, and what is Africa taking out of her?
She would have to take with her the notion, and I'm hoping that the Africans, you see, there's a recognition that the Chinese have stolen a march from the US in Africa. And there's that urgency for the US to rekindle that relationship it once had with Africa and to at least be at power with the Chinese. I'm hoping that the Africans leaders would realize that this puts them at a strategic importance, whereby for once their raw materials, access to their resources, access to their industries can now be at a price that benefits Africans. So it means that if you were to choose between a US or a China or a Europe or other parts of the world, at least Africa finds itself in that position where they can choose the best terms that can benefit themselves and benefit their communities. So I'm hoping that she'll be able to take that back with her. Secondly, I'm hoping that she will have a reassurance and understanding of the complexities of issues and understand that there are no simple answers. If there were, they would have been resolved previously. And understand that all parties have to come to the table, and it's very important that decision making is made by Africans and seem to be doing so. So if she can understand that principle and go one step further and come up with packages that benefit Africans so that they can actually be able to trade properly, so that their goods can find themselves in Western markets, then I will be personally very, very pleased. And of course, if there's a mechanism to reduce aid over time and not lead on to this dependency syndrome that we've seen African leaders dependent, whereby 70, 80, 90% of their budget is very much dependent on Western aid, which, as we realize over the last 50-odd years, haven't benefited Africa at all. If you look at mortality rates and look at the numbers of people who've been living below the poverty back in the 60s, and you compare that with what we have today, there's a disparity of nearly 80%. And of course, that significantly is important, that we recognize that aid hasn't worked, and African leaders have got to be able to raise capital elsewhere. Now, not raise capital within the IMF or the World Bank or the Paris Club, no, not at all, but a recognition that they have to be able to go elsewhere, even mean going to the East, going to places like India, China, and other countries that can raise the much needed capital that Africa clearly needs, and for Africa to take responsibility for their own country. So if she can take back that and have reassurances on that, at least I think personally I'll be a pleased man.